Hello, everyone. Welcome to LexTalk World Talk Show presented by ClickAway Creators. Today, we have Mr. Thomas E. Zoeller with us. He is General Counsel for Markets and Regulation for Norfolk Southern Corporation. Mr. Zoeller joined NS on August 1st, 2019, after more than 25 years in federal services as a lawyer and a member of the Senior Executive Service. Prior to joining NS, he was the Senior Advisor to the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. He has previously served as the Managing Director for the National Transport Safety Board and Chief in the Staff of the Federal Aviation Administration. He was Legislative Counsel to the US Senator Wendell H. Ford, primarily advising the Senator on transportation, telecommunication, and federal election and law policy. In addition to the federal services, he was Vice President to Regulatory Affairs at the American Association of Airport Executives and President and CEO of the National Air Carrier Association. Mr. Zoeller received his BA from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and his JD from Seton Hall University in Newark, New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Zoeller. We are pleased to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, great. So I think I've covered the most, but we would still like to hear from you about your professional and personal journey so far in the legal space.
Sure. I think that, as you said, I graduated from Seton Hall University and began my career in Washington, D.C. as a staff attorney at a small federal agency. And I don't think I would have predicted then that I would wind up as General Counsel of Norfolk Southern when I started out, but there was certainly serendipity, and I think just good opportunities and choices along the way from my law career that got me to where I am today. So as you referenced, I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years on federal transportation issues, and that transitioned to that Federal Aviation Administration, where I was a legislative counsel there and then became chief of staff and worked on a variety of issues, most notably there 9/11 and the aftermath of that incident. I worked in some trade associations and then returned to federal service at the National Transportation Safety Board and finished up at the Chemical Safety Board before I was recruited to come and work for Norfolk Southern. So it's been quite an exciting journey, and I'm very grateful for the many mentors and colleagues along the way who've helped me get here for sure.
All right, thank you so much for that quick brief about yourself. And this definitely has been a great journey. Moving ahead and talking about the transportation sector a little bit more in the USA. We know that COVID-19 has kind of impacted almost everything, but we would like to know about how the transportation sector in the USA region has been impacted. And as a legal professional, what kind of solutions do you foresee about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that the effect of COVID-19 is still playing itself out. So we still don't know what the long-term effects will be. I think I've equated a lot of the work, that we've been doing here at Norfolk Southern has been like trying to change the tire on a car that's moving at 55 miles an hour. It's been very quick to adapt to a changing environment, not only from the standpoint of just trying to conduct your own operations and maintaining the guidelines that the Centers for Disease Control had put out and social distancing and all those issues, but also the effect as it's played out with the customers that we serve and how they have been trying to respond to that issue. So it's been trying to maintain the continuity of operations and then addressing, you talked about the legal issues. We have contracts with our customers, and how do we deal with all of those issues? A lot of discussion about force majeure and interruption of service and how you deal with all those issues. So it's been, I would say, very complex and very time demanding at the beginning because of the uncertainty. I think the challenges that we're facing as we go forward continue to be maintaining continuity of operations and compliance with standards, but changing standards based on what various states and localities are doing in response to the resurgence of the virus in various states and localities across the country. For Norfolk Southern, we serve 22 states of the US, mostly all the states east of the Mississippi River, and have over 20,000 miles of track that we serve. So it's a little bit like whack-a-mole because every state has been different in how it's responded to the various issues. And then when you get sort of a sense of, I wouldn't say normalcy, but a sort of a standard level of operation that's changed because the virus has changed. And so it's being able to be responsive and adaptive to all of that, which I think has been the most challenging for everyone from operational and from a legal perspective.
Absolutely. You rightly said force majeure is something that kind of became the superstar overnight. Everybody was talking about that. If I talk about the legal industry to be specific, and transportation sector is definitely has been impacted. I think one of the 10 industries that has been impacted the most, transportation comes into that, because social distancing is definitely something which is very difficult to maintain, but you got to do that. So I completely agree with you on that. Moving ahead and going to the next question, so since you have been, you've worked with the transportation sector majorly during your career, we would like to know what lessons or experiences you have learned in the public sector career that are valuable to your private sector work as well.
Sure, I think one of the particular challenges that I think the industry is experiencing is the introduction of new technologies that are leading to greater efficiencies within the operation and dealing with a regulatory framework that doesn't necessarily contemplate those types of technologies that you're using. So, a good example would be the physical inspection requirements that are necessary in the rail industry for ensuring that the track is safe to operate on. And there's specific requirements of physical inspection. At Norfolk Southern and many of the other railroads, we're using new electronic technologies, outfitting engines to do inspections pretty much on a regular basis every time the train traverses over certain track. And so trying to get the regulatory framework to adapt to the new technologies, I think is really the challenge that we're facing going forward. It's not to say that the regulators don't want to do that. I think they do, but it just takes a long time for the regulatory process to kind of catch up because it's very sort of task oriented. And what we're really looking to transition to is a more performance-based regulatory framework. The Federal Railroad Administration has already laid the groundwork for that. And the aviation industry is a little bit further ahead on all of that. But that becomes, I think, the challenge that we're moving forward. And, my experience at the NTSB and other agencies of the like is when you have agencies that have historically been focused on specific rules and the requirements to meet those rules, they become a little bit more like ticket writers. When the safety inspectors come out, they're kind of going through a checklist. What are the rules? What are the things specifically in the rule did you do or not do? And when you move to a performance-based sort of framework, you're less on the ticket writing, and now you're looking more at a more systems-oriented approach, and that becomes sort of troublesome and difficult for inspectors to kind of get their head around about what they should be looking at and how do you ensure that the entity is meeting the framework of safety. So this is I think the transitional area that we're moving into.
All right, I think that makes a lot of sense, and thank you so much for sharing that information with us. Since, if I talk about your transportation background, that includes aviation as well as rail. So what similarities do you see between the two transport sectors?
Well, I think both sectors would be mad at me for saying this, but I think there's a lot of similarity when you look at network and network operations and how airlines have their hub networks, railroads have sort of their hub yards that they move and transition rail too. And so as you try and develop greater efficiencies in your system, you're trying to maximize the, the, the network that you've built, because you only make money when you're moving airplanes or trains through the system, right? You don't make any money when trains or airplanes are sitting idle. So you need to maximize all of that. For the rail industry, the challenge, of course, is that the systems that we operate on are fixed. It's a fixed railway. And so how do you maximize the movement of trains through that system as quickly and efficiently as possible? So there's a lot of similarity. I think that the rail industry is where the airline industry was probably 20 years ago, and moving forward. We're sort of embracing technology today to become more efficient. So I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from aviation as they apply to rail. As I mentioned, moving to a performance-based rule system. So the aviation industry has been in the safety management system, SMS, for quite some time. That's something that we're just beginning to move into from a regulatory framework that FRA has adopted just recently. So that transition is going on. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to learn from where aviation has taken technology and used that and advanced that to the rail transportation sector. A lot of it, I think, goes to human interaction with technology. And as you look at more automation, how does the human fit into that automated environment?
That makes sense. And I think your experience in the aviation will definitely come handy when you work with the rail departments and the rail transportation sector. And you rightly said, I think the rail transportation sector is somewhere where the aviation was 20 years back. So I think there is a lot to do. There is a lot to be improved and evolved. And from the COVID perspective and from the current scenario perspective, I think both the industries have their own solutions in the place that they both are working on right now. So thank you so much for sharing those great insights with us. Moving ahead and talking about a little bit more, being a legal professional, Thomas, we would like to know what are those 3 core values that you truly believe in and you would like to suggest to young legal professionals or kids who are in the law colleges right now?
Yes, I would say that given my experience both in the federal government and where I am today, I think one of the things that makes you as a successful lawyer is understanding your client's needs and trying to get them to yes. I think sometimes people view law as the last stop to get something adopted or approved. Because I think sometimes people are fearful that the lawyers are always going to say no. And I think that being an agent of change and an agent of yes is really important for your client. There's obviously going to be challenges because you want to be able to get to yes in the legal and proper means. And I think trying to be integrated at the very beginning of the decision-making process to kind of chart out for your client what the pitfalls and the obstacles might be and incorporate that in the development is very helpful. So I think being open-minded, I think being responsive is really important, but also, the integrity of maintaining the law and being able to stand up and let people know when they're not going to be compliant with something is really important. So I think you need to just develop an open and trusting relationship with your client and be able to help them to get to the right solution. And it's sometimes, that path may not be the path that they want to go on. There's a little bit of a different path that you might have to get them on. But as I used to say, when at NTSB and trying to get agencies to adopt the safety recommendations, there are many paths to the same castle. And so you just sometimes have to get people to understand it may take a little bit longer, but this will be the right way. And in the end, you've been able to achieve the goal that you wanted to get.
Absolutely, and I think that it makes a lot of sense for a lot of young legal professionals to understand the client's requirements, and but still, be wise with the decision and take them to the right castle. Maybe take a different path, as you said. So, with that, Mr. Zoeller, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for sharing those great insights with us. We would love to chat with you again on some other trending topics in the legal industry. For our viewers, if you like this chat, then please go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Clickaway Creators. Also, share this interview with your friends and colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day ahead.